This meeting is being recorded.
Good afternoon, folks. I'm Paul Gilje. I'm here with Kurt Gilje, and today we'll be focusing on the family of Torsten and Mary Gilje from Wyndmere, North Dakota, who have very close friends in the Rolette area. And Kurt will be making the main present. His grandson, Torsten's grandson, Kurt, will be making the main presentation today, and one or two of his brothers are here too, and they might make some comments. So we're happy to have you on. I'll give a little background, and then we'll turn to Kurt for the rest. I think you all have the PowerPoint in front of you, and as we start, we clarify something about spelling and pronunciation. Two different spellings are common: Gilje and Gilje, G-I-L-J-A and G-I-L-J-E. In Norwegian, the term Gilje is a plural form of gil, which means a gap, in this case, a gap in the mountains. Gilje in Norway is a narrow valley hemmed in by surrounding mountains, as you will see. Gilje and Gilje are used by different families in the same area of Norway, even among those who are closely related. Most use G-I-L-J-E. On maps, the spelling G-I-L-J-A is used. In pronunciation, the Norwegians say Gilje, but most Americans say Gilje. A few Gilje families in America still use the Norwegian pronunciation. Next. Kurt, next slide. Okay, the Gilje community in Norway. It's in southwestern Norway. It's a short distance east of Stavanger, about 40 miles. It's part of the Gjesdal commune. It's part of the larger Dirdal community. It's near the shore of Hogsfjord with access to the Atlantic Ocean. There's a fairly small number of dwellings, perhaps 300 population. It's a small area, only about 10 miles in length. Next.
Sorry, pay attention here.
It's less than a mile in width, very narrow. It's the site of a significant World War II battle between Norwegians and Germany. It's economically strong. It's led by a significant, long-standing, local established, locally run, locally employed window factory called Gilje Tre. It's surrounded by scenic mountains, popular with campers and cross-country and Nordic skiers. Next. If you take a look at the map, Stavanger is in the northwest corner of this map, right on the ocean, and the community of Gilje is right here. And Torsten Gilje, who we're featuring today, and his wife, Torsten was born out here, but he moved up here with his father Tobias, and that's where the descendants of Torsten and the family descendants live today. Next. This is the Gilje Valley, 40 miles east of Stavanger, and it's very narrow. And right in this area here is where Kurt's grandpa Torsten was born. He moved to Stavanger very shortly thereafter. And just off the map up here is the Hogsfjord. Next. This is a picture of the window factory in this small valley called Gilje Vindu. And some of us actually own Gilje Vindu windows. In my last home, actually they wouldn't sell it to us, they gave it to us. We got a 6-sided or 8-sided window we put in the peak of one of our rooms, and happy to have that. And the bird is the Gilje Vindu icon. Next. This is Gilje in 2003, and right there is where Torstein's father would have been born, and a short lifetime later moved over in this area a short distance away. Next. This is 1980, the same, I took this picture in 1980, trying to make it essentially the same location as the other one. And that would have been the house right there that they would have first lived in. This is the mountain called, forget now what it calls. Anybody remember? Frederica, do you remember that mountain is called? Kvidelandsfjellet. That's what it's called. Kvidelandsfjellet. And the people down here own summer homes up here in the mountains. Next one. The church that Torstein might have been baptized in, and certainly his parents were, is located at Forsand, which is a short distance away from Gilje, and people would have gone by boat to this church. And after Torstein moved away, they completed another church in Stavanger, in Gilje. Next slide. This is the other church that was built in 1903 and had its 100th anniversary 20 years ago. Next.
Okay, so this is where I'm going to take over.
Go ahead, Kurt.
And I'm going to start with my grandmother, Mary Christensen. Unfortunately, she passed away young or early 1955, so I don't have a whole lot of information on her. And she moved from Elkader up to Wyndmere, and I don't think she brought a whole lot of stuff with her. But anyway, this is we were able. Paul and I were able to find the gravestones at the Lutheran Church Cemetery in St. Olaf in Clayton County, Iowa, which is the northeastern part of Iowa. And this is of her, Mary's grandfather and the father of Andrew Christensen, who was her. So it was a grandfather of Mary. And this would be the grave of Oline Halverstead, I guess, Christensen, and that is the mother of Andrew Christensen, who was Mary Christensen's father. So it's the grandmother of Mary, my grandmother. And here's the grave of Mary's parents, Mary Christensen's Gilje, and it's Andrew and Agnet. And the one thing I noticed on this was that Andrew died in 1901, so that was before my grandfather Torsten had come across to the U.S. But they're all buried in that Lutheran Church Cemetery up in that St. Olaf, Clayton area of Iowa. This is a picture of Mary and her younger sister, Nellie. I should mention that she had two other siblings. Her oldest sibling was Oline, and Oline ended up marrying a man named Albert Thompson, who will come into the picture a little later. And Albert Thompson was from the Elkader area originally. So this is a picture of Mary and younger sister Nellie, and they had a brother named August. And I found a picture of August, and he must be at his wedding. And my grandmother Mary would be standing up on the left-hand side of the picture of the photo, and sitting down on the right-hand side would be her brother August. And that's about all I have when she was growing up. Now, she graduated, or she went to college in Iowa to it's
Waldorf.
Waldorf, thank you. Waldorf College in Forest City, Iowa. And this is a picture of her and her, I guess it's a first and second grade in Farmersburg, Iowa, which is very close. It's part of Clayton County, and it's real close to Elkader. And so she graduated college in 1911. She taught in that Iowa area for a couple of years. And then in 1913 and 1914, she moved up to North Dakota and taught at a school called the Crognes School. And that Crognes has owned the quarter. That's the only reason I can see that they called it the Crognes School. But that was about 1.5 miles away from where my grandfather's farmstead was. So she was up there for a couple of years in 1913 and 1914. Her older sister was also in that area because Oline married Albert Thompson. and Albert Thompson also bought some land adjacent to where our home quarter is in Wyndmere, North Dakota. So I think, I don't know this for certain, but there certainly must have been a tie between Albert Thompson and my grandfather Torsten. And obviously they were tied together because they married sisters. Mary Christensen married my grandfather Torsten, and her older sister Oline married Albert Thompson. So
Could I
that's
interrupt, Kurt? Could I interrupt just at that moment? Sounds
Yeah.
like some interesting romance going on here. Is it clear that did Grandpa Torsten know Mary before he moved to North Dakota, and did she know he was there? Is it possible that they had a romance going back in Elkader and continued, that she came up there after he did? What do we know about that?
I don't know anything about that, but I guess there'd be it all depends on when Albert Thompson and and Mary's older sister met, because
Okay.
so I assume that it was something through there. I really don't know much about that, but there had to be something, because she graduated from Waldorf, taught in Iowa a couple years, and then moved to North Dakota, right by where her sister lived, and taught there. And then my grandfather. So I don't know if they met when she moved up to take this teaching position at the Krogna School, or before. I'm not sure. But Albert Thompson and my grandfather Torsten, they knew each other. So
Yeah.
there had to be some sort of connection that worked.
Terrific. That's great. Okay.
And then
going.
she moved back after she taught a couple years in North Dakota, and then she moved back to Farmersburg, Iowa, in that Elkader area, and taught a couple more years until she came back to North Dakota and married my grandfather. So that's all gray, but it's something with the Elkader and Albert Thompson, whom he must have bought land around the same time as my grandfather did, and is the same area. So, and this is another picture of class in Farmersburg, Iowa, that Mary she's the one standing in back in the white dress there, and the kids of that class.
Marvelous detail. Great picture.
Yeah, so that, until I'm going to now start back with my grandfather, Torsten, whose parents are Tobias and Karen, are in this picture, along with his 5 other siblings. My grandfather, Torsten, isn't pictured in this because he had immigrated to Norway or to U.S. at that time. So I don't have a lot of information from his time in Norway, other than this one picture I found of his brother Andreas, and it must be his wedding picture, and he lived in Stavanger, Norway as well. That's the only picture I had of that. So here's his birth certificate that we found I found a copy of it. Torsten's birth certificate of October 7th, 1887. He was born in Gilje, and then at the age of 6 months, they moved to Stavanger in that Ulenhag area. He was the oldest of the family of 6 kids, and he attended school in Stavanger through the equivalent of 8th grade. He left Stavanger in February of 1906 and arrived in Elkader March of 06. And prior to leaving Stavanger, he had written a letter to his uncle Vellas Gilje, who lived in Elkader, Iowa, informing him that he was leaving Stavanger and would be coming to Elkader to be there. My grandfather borrowed $56 from his father and that covered both the ship and also the train to get to Elkader. I called out who the captain was of this boat, Captain Edward Smith was the captain of the Baltic, which is the boat in the picture, from 1904 to 1907. And the only reason I called it out is because I don't know if it became infamous a few years later in 1912, because he was a captain of the Titanic when that went down. So here's a picture of Iowa, and I've circled where the county of Clayton is at. So that's up in the northeast side of Iowa, and let's go to the next one then. So my grandfather cleared Ellis Island, came from New York, was on the train to get to Clayton County, and Elkader is right where the L and the A, I've circled it there. It's in the L and the A of Clayton County. So that's where Elkader was. And I'm going to read some of this from his write-up. He said at McGregor, which is north and east of Elkader up here by the river, at McGregor, Iowa, I had to change trains to get to Elkader. I showed the conductor my ticket. He checked my name on the suitcase and left in a hurry. The conductor was a good friend of my uncle, so he recognized the name and came back with my uncle, who was returning on the same train from a business trip to Chicago. My uncle had left his home before the letter arrived telling him my decision to come to his home in the United States, so I can't imagine what he felt when we were on the same train. So you just go, wow, that's something. Anyway, when my grandfather, he obviously met his uncle on the train, Vellas, and he went to his home. I'm going to continue reading here. It says, my uncle got me a job as a farm laborer for $15 a month. And the next year it was raised to $20 a month. Every morning I got up between 4 and 5 a.m. to milk 18 cows and then be in the field by 7 a.m. I was too busy to regret leaving Norway. I paid back the $56 I had borrowed from my dad the second year I was in the United States. I could not speak a word of English, and my first employer was a German, so I still didn't learn much English, but got pretty good with the German language. And then by the fall of 1911, I'd saved enough money to make a down payment on a piece of property, 160 acres in the prairie in North Dakota, in Homestead Township, where my son Kermit and his family live at the present time. So this was back in, I guess, the 80s, early 80s. In the fall of 1912, I hired 95 acres of that 160 to be broken up and put into flax. And in the spring of 1913, I moved to section 27, which is just south of where his quarter was. And in 1918, Albert Thompson moved in with me and we farmed together until 1919. And 1919 is when Torsten married Mary. So the next slide I have is of North Dakota, and I've circled Rowlett up there because that's kind of the center of the reunion and everything like that. And then there's like a rectangle down in the southeast corner, and that's where Wyndmere, North Dakota is. And this next slide shows it's circled, and you can see Wyndmere, North Dakota has a little dot. Barney is another small town there. And then I circled Homestead, and Homestead isn't a town, it's a township. But my understanding is that they had a post office and a store at one time. This is a map from 1906, so apparently that was still going on. And you can see on this map that Wyndmere is fairly close to both South Dakota and Minnesota, so right down there in that corner of the state. This is I don't know if it's a plat map or not, but it's a map of Homestead Township, and it's in Richland County that my grandfather Torsten bought the 160 acres in. So you can see here's the quarter, that's the home quarter that Torsten bought. And then here is a little I don't know if you can see my pointer or not, hopefully you can, but to the south and to the east, there's Edward Crognes quarter. And that's where the Crognes school was that Mary taught at for two at 2 years. And right here to the west of Torsten Gilje's quarters, Albert Thompson. So that's where his land was from. So I'll just remind everybody, Albert Thompson married Oline Christensen, who is a sister of my grandmother, Mary, who married Torsten Gilje. So that was all kind of, I'm sure I was told that many times while I was growing up, but it just kind of sunk in now, 60 years later, I guess.
Kurt, on the Thompson connection, do you today have any connection with your Thompson relatives?
Well, I'd have to probably rely on my brothers. So I would say there are any Jimmy and Llewellyn and one of the daughters. Not much. I would say not much. There aren't any Thompsons on that line, on that land. The Albert Thompson's daughter married a Gutzmer, and that's who was there. And they're not on that land anymore, and I'm not sure that any one of them are on. So I would say no. I should have just answered that.
One other thing about the early years of Mary and Torsten, and that is that unlike many other situations, the male in the family, in this case Torsten, did not have a wife or a future wife from Norway. He knew nobody. He came over to the United States, and Mary, who was a third generation immigrant, he married her, which is just interesting that the people of long settlement had some social contact with the newcomers as well.
Yeah, that was all surprising to me as well.
Sure.
So anyway, it's been a learning experience. So here's a picture of Wyndmere, North Dakota in 1915, and that is the town 7 miles southwest of Torsten's farmstead. And you can see there's like an elevator that was on the Burlington Northern line. And the only other, I think we think the picture was taken from the elevator that's on the Sioux line. And that's Wyndmere was at the crossroads of two railroad tracks built there.
Another very, very good shot, very clear. They did a very good job, who took that picture. Yeah.
So here's a picture from 1914. That's Torsten on the left. I think they're harvesting corn. I'm not sure who is on the right-hand side there, but harvesting corn. This is Torsten's naturalization papers that he received in 1915. And this is from the Blue Book, a picture of Torsten in 1916, the oldest of Tobias and Karen. We're not sure this is Torsten plowing, but I don't know what else it would be, but we're not convinced. But obviously they're running some implement behind horses.
Four horses. That's a pretty good team. Wow.
Yeah. And then a threshing crew that we believe Albert Thompson and Torsten Gilje were part of. And obviously they were married to sisters, Mary and Oline, but you can tell they were using a steam engine at that point in time to run the threshing machine. And then this next picture is a little clearer. It's more recent as well. It's a threshing crew around 1944, and my father Kermit, I believe, is the one up in the hay wagon to the left. Hay wagon, I guess, the shock wagon, where they had the grain in the shocks, and he was feeding the threshing machine. And then my grandfather Torsten was the middle of the three guys standing here. We have guesses on who these other guys are, but I'm not going to share them because I'm not sure. I think this is Albert Thompson. I'm fairly sure on that one, but not sure on everybody else. And then my grandfather's write-up talked about a B International. That was the first tractor he bought in 1940, and that's sticking out on, I guess, the left elbow of the woman here that has brought lunch to the.
That's not Mary, is it?
No, I don't think so.
Okay,
Wayne, it's nod or shake your head. No, I don't think so.
okay. But clearly
Yeah,
that's
he doesn't think so.
it's a very good illustration of the partnership that existed on every farm, that during coffee time and at lunchtime, the women
Yeah.
of the area would bring the lunch out to the thrashers. I have a distinct memory of this in Rolette County when I was a little boy and was visiting my uncles in the summertime. We'd go up there, and that lunchtime was a big deal. I remember the big jars full of coffee already with cream in it, because I remember it was a cream colored coffee. But that was very significant in the families. Thank you.
Yep. So here's a picture of the farm in 1924, and I think the only thing I was going to point out here, yeah, it looks pretty desolate, is read from Grandpa's write-up. He said, in October 4th, 1919, I married Mary Christensen of Farmersburg, Iowa, whom I had met before I came to North Dakota. So they must have met in Elkader.
Uh-huh.
We were married in Wapton, North Dakota. We talked about Waldorf, Todd School, Todd Furnaces. And then he had built the barn and granary on my own land by this time, and we lived in the granary our first winter. So in 1919, when they got married, they spent their first winter in this building. I guess it's the middle one. The barn's on the left, and the granary is behind the windmill there. And then in 24, he had a house built there. So yeah, lived in a granary first winter in North Dakota. And you can see how many trees are around there. So
Boy.
yeah, boy is right. Olive and Kermit were the two kids that Torsten and Mary had. Olive was born in 1922 and Kermit in 1924. Here's a picture of Torsten and Mary. Mary on the left, Torsten on the right, Olive in the standing, and then my father Kermit on Torsten's lap, about 1930. Here's a picture of the family on the steps, and I believe this is our house in Wyndmere, or on the farm. And it's Olive on the left, Mary, Kermit, and Torsten. About 1930.
What year would that be? About what year? Oh, 1930.
I'm guessing 1930. That's a guess, Paul.
So that car over to the left would be either 1930 or earlier. Yeah.
And then here's a picture, again, guessing around 1940, with Olive on my aunt on the left, Mary, Torsten, and my dad, Kermit, on the right. And that, I believe, is in the house in Wyndmere and the farm. Again, another picture about 1944. Yeah, October 1944. So we'll be fairly confident on the year here. And that's a picture of Torsten and Mary on the farm. And here's another picture about 1946 of Olive, Torsten, Mary, and Kermit. That isn't our farm. I'm not exactly sure it was, but it's just a picture. They must have gone somewhere after church to have lunch or dinner or something. In 1949, so Olive went to college after high school, and then she moved out to Washington, D.C. after college, and I think she was working for the Pentagon in some capacity, and she met John Ninkovich in D.C., and they were married in 1949. And this is a wedding picture of, we believe it's a Krogness on the left, far left, then it's Olive, the bride, John, the groom, and my dad, Kermit, in 1949. Here's a picture in 1973 of John and Olive and their two children, Steve on the left, and Greg on the right. And they lived in Illinois, in St. Charles, Illinois. John was an engineer with a company for many, many years, and they lived in St. Charles, Illinois.
Where did Olive go to school?
I think science school. Does that make sense, Wayne? Yep, thanks.
Where?
Wapton Science School. So that'd be in Wapton,
Oh,
North
Wapton
Dakota.
Science. So
Yeah.
she got a job then at the Pentagon after she graduated from Wapton Science.
Correct.
Ah, okay. Did Kermit go to Wapton too?
No, he didn't go to school. He didn't go to school after college. He was farming, and
After high school?
I believe at that time he had a deferment from the war. So he didn't go to school. I think he took a farm deferment.
But let me interrupt at this point. I think it's again fascinating. Go back to Mary. Mary's parents sent her to Waldorf College to get her college degree. A very significant number of immigrant women around the turn of the century and before were going to college. We noted that in some of our previous Zoom sessions on Saturday afternoon, how much more common it was for the women in farm families than the men to go to college.
Yeah, I found that fascinating, that especially with Mary, that she went to Waldorf out of high school, and it's pretty great.
Clearly, there was a commitment to education on the
Yeah.
part of the farmers, and they needed teachers, so it wasn't totally unusual to see that happen.
Okay, then my parents, Kermit and Arlene Torsten Gilje, were married in 1951, and Torsten and Mary on the left, and Arlene, my mother's parents, on the right, John and Olda Ostern. And they were from that Wyndmere, Richland County area, I'll call it. So in that same general area. Here's a picture of the family I think about 1965. So my mom and dad, Kermit and Arlene, sitting down, and then Wayne is on the left. Dale, my oldest brother, is standing behind me, and then I'm in front between the parents and my younger brother Howard on my dad's lap. I remember how miserable that day was. So after Kermit and Arlene were married, Torsten and Mary moved into Wyndmere about 1951. They had a house in Wyndmere, and then they moved off the farm and into Wyndmere. And
Kermit and Arlene then moved into the farm, and today, which one of your
today Wayne and Dale are living there, and I have a picture coming up of the farm and what it basically looks like now. Here's Torsten, 90th birthday, 1977. Here's the farm in the mid-90s, and the granary's gone. That's been moved, and the barn has been buried. So there aren't as many buildings, but you can see there's some trees to slow down the wind a little bit.
Is that great big building, the barn? Boy, that's enormous.
No, that's just a steel shed to store stuff in.
Okay. So what's the crop? What's the crop like this past year?
Well, Wayne's on mute. I think it's doing okay. We've had plenty of rain. I don't know if there's been too much rain, but it seems like I think it's doing fairly well. Thumbs up or thumbs down, Wayne? Yeah, that's when you farm, it's always like that. It's never good enough, and
Yeah. How many acres do they have today?
Well, we just rent out the 2 quarters.
Oh, you rent them out yourself.
Yeah, we don't farm
that
any longer. So there's a neighbor that's farming the land now.
Okay.
Is that the original homestead there that's been added onto or something?
Yeah, that's correct. So that house that you saw in the middle, it is the main portion here, and then they've kind of added on three of the sides. When they had running water, they added on a bathroom on the one side, and they closed in the porch on the front, and then added on this side room here. So, but yes, that's the original. And then Mary, I think we talked about it a little early. Little earlier. She's buried in Wyndmere at the Elk Creek Cemetery, and she died in 1955. So unfortunately, that was before most of her grandchildren were born. Dale was born a couple years, I guess, before. And then my grandfather, Torsten, passed away in 1983. And also my parents, both Kermit and Arlene, are buried at that cemetery as well. So that's everything I have. Torsten at the 1976 reunion. So if there's any questions or comments.
Terrific job. Terrific job, Kurt. Thank you so much.
Thank
for
you.
the time you spent.
Yeah, thanks for taking the time. I appreciate it.
Yeah, great job.
Okay, well, let's open to questions or comments or questions. Don't just need to be asked questions, comments.
I have a question. So when you pass down a farm from family to family and they're like adding on, but I'm assuming their original mortgage has been paid and that kind of thing, then does that allow the next generation to have money to buy the silos and the different, is it sort of just a kind of people just keep adding on?
You know, I think every situation is different, and if it isn't set up well before the parents pass away, it can cause quite a bit of heartache. And unfortunately, it's worked out well for us. But it's kind of defined. If someone's farming, it typically what happens is it all depends on what the owners or the parents, how they word their will or whatever they have, and how that goes, and then you just follow that. We, in our situation, we've set up I guess it's an LLC where all four brothers own part of the land. So every place is different, and every situation, I guess, is different, and it can be complicated, I guess. That you hear so many stories of complications. Fortunately, we haven't had that. Yeah.
Does it give the next generation a head start each generation, or
I think you're right. I think that happens quite often because it is so expensive to get into farming right now that I think for the most part, if someone is farming the family farm, they for the most part have an opportunity, and it's set up so that they can succeed but it helps tremendously, I think, in most family farm situations that there's some land that they don't have to go out and buy everything right off the bat, because I think that would be really hard to be a startup farmer and not have the land or any equipment or any of those sorts of things. So
it's just fascinating to us California city dwellers where our land is measured by square feet.
yeah. It's hard to buy a house in California as well, so that's kind of priced out.
Yeah.
More comments? Andrew, do you have any thoughts about your great-grandparents? And
It was a great presentation.
Yeah, what do you want? What do you need?
I do have one question. Do you know what the motivation was for Torsten to move?
He in his write-up, he basically said all I wanted to do was make a living. Is what he actually what he actually said in his little write-up. You know, I suspect that there was, I think and Paul will help me out on this, but I think it's difficult to own land. It was difficult to, if you didn't have it, to own land in Norway, and they saw the US as an opportunity where there was plenty of land and it was quite reasonable and you could probably do it. Where I don't know that that path was as clear or as easy in Norway. And Paul, you probably have a better.
I don't have any answer, but the fact that that Vellas and Elkader and there was another relative up in Norris Springs, Iowa, writing letters back to Norway. All the experts tell us that those letters back home had a big impact on people deciding to try to better their lives. So and certainly the fact that Torsten went to Elkader to be with his uncle first would indicate the influence of that. So yeah, that would be the case. Any of your brothers have any more comments, Kurt?
I don't know. I think we lost one.
Okay, right.
We'll find them.
Did Torsten talk much to you about his life in Norway?
Not really. I think I heard, for me personally, I think he talked more about his time in Iowa and the working for $15 a month.
Okay.
And you know, and unfortunately I didn't ask him a lot. I knew Stavanger and I knew the kind of the area, but I don't, he didn't talk a lot about no, not to me anyway. I don't know if he did. As you take Wayne's he's getting off mute now, so anything to add, Wayne? You're off mute.
Oh, great fun. At the time he moved, the economic situation in Norway was not good. So, like Curtis was saying, he felt that moving to the United States, he had a much better chance of succeeding and actually being able to own land, like Curtis said, and to be able to have a family and increase his income.
Wayne, that's a very good point. You think about, it didn't take Torsten that long to get his 160 acres, did it? Of his own land.
No, I was kind of surprised by that when I saw it.
Yeah, less than 10 years, he had enough money to make a down payment on his first quarter.
Okay, Frederica, do you have any thoughts, comments you want to make?
So I think it's
I noticed that Jeff is on. Jeff, thanks for coming on. How's your wife doing?
Oh, she's an X-ray. She had turned her ankle at least, and maybe worse. So we'll see.
Oh, okay. Might be broken.
Could be.
Okay,
It could be.
Wish her all the best, and thanks, Jeff.
We appreciate that
for coming on. Yeah, we've had a good discussion. You'll get it on the and Jeff. I've been telling people about our session next Saturday. Will be a internal discussion for the first time, talking about plans for the reunion. So as many people can come will be very valuable. I don't know if you have anything to add on that. Okay. All right. Anybody else? Frederica, thoughts? Rocky?
no,
Okay.
I'm good, Paul.
Kurt?
Thank you.
No, I'm good too. Thanks for listening. Appreciate it.
Thank you very much, all of you.
Now I know,
It's been a great.
just one quick thing. You mentioned that he saved up the money. I gather he was a little bit later. Was there not homestead land available? Was it a little bit in the late 1880s?
Well, it would have been around 1911 when he bought it. So I know it hadn't been turned over yet because he had someone break the ground after he had purchased it. But I don't think it was from the Homestead Act that he had the land. I think there was some other owner that he bought it from. Would you agree, Wayne?
Yeah, if you look at the records in the county, generally the land went through at least 5 to 6 ownerships before it was bought generally by the person who ended up farming it. I think what was going on was it was a great deal of speculation in terms of trying to make money by turning the land over.
But Wayne, this was Red River Valley land, wasn't it? That the most valuable stuff around.
It was technically not Red River Valley. We were not considered Red River Valley, but yes, the railroad was coming in, and a great many people felt that by buying this land, they were making a really good investment, and that by hanging on to it, they could make significant
How much
profit.
of the 160 acres is tillable?
I would say all of it.
All of it. Okay, great. Thank you. Okay. Any further comments?
Nope.
Well, have a good rest of the day. Again, our sincere thanks to Kurt for the work that he did, and for the rest of you for getting on, and look forward to hearing from you next Saturday. Next month in August, we will be hearing from some people in the Stavanger area who are related to us here in America, and we're going to be going back a generation or two. So it'll be another session with Rasmus Rasmussen. Okay, thank you all.
Thanks,
Goodbye.
Paul.
Thank you, Paul.
Thanks, Paul.
Bye, Andrew.
Thank you, Paul.